Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today I am very excited to be joined on the show all the way from the other side of the United States. It's Alyssa from Lynx. Alyssa, how are you doing? Okay?
Doing great. Thanks, Toby. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been excited about this one since it popped into my diary. I did a little bit of research and we were talking beforehand. I think there are two areas that we've had on this show as themes throughout this year that sort of combine really well, and two areas which I think are ultra relevant at the moment. It says it right behind your head there: AI against fraud and financial crime. Financial crime, I think, is one of the most interesting areas within financial services at the moment. It's a growing threat, a growing problem, which continues to expand apace. AI, the catch-all solution for everything it seems at the moment, but also something there which just completely changes the game for good and bad in terms of what that can look like. And obviously, when you're putting the right sort of things in place, we can do something phenomenal about it. And I'm really excited to unpack how are doing that and how you guys fit into it all. So loads and loads to cover today, which I'm very excited about. But before we do that, Alyssa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I lead product for the AML solutions at Lynx Tech, but I really started my career as an investigator myself at a really big bank in the US. And I really started at the height of all the regulatory action going on at some of the tier one banks in 2013. And so I really got to see how enforcement action went from, hitting the banks into practice. And then I went from there to PwC, where I got to see a number of different examples in how to, consult banks and really put it into practice and help them really apply best practices efficiently. And then I got to go from consulting into product, where I'm actually getting to productize these best practices and use cutting edge innovation to help customers get ahead of this. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to be at Lynx. Lynx has been actually around for 30 years, where they've been developing big data AI for fraud prevention, helping tier one customers, fintechs even get ahead of fraud. But now they're applying this cutting edge technology in the world of AML as well. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about how we do that.
I am as well, and I love that background as well because it's like the perfect the growth trajectory, isn't it, of where you're at. I say on the show one of the job titles or positions that I've been most fascinated in for a number of years now is the rise and rise of product. And over the last year, I think last couple of years in particular, I think it's become more and more of an important role in every single company, and
Yeah.
deservedly become a genuine C-suite position because when I look at and particularly, I think it's particularly interesting, in a 30-year-old company because sometimes it can be difficult to sort of move that sort of needle for where you're at. But where you've got this sort of absolute advance in terms of technology, it becomes a really important piece to get that product right and to go out there and to be able to gather the information of what clients are looking for, to be product led, to be client led. I think makes it a really interesting play, and that sort of combination of custodian, I guess, working in institutions and then sort of moving through into that consulting world brings a really interesting sort of background to you to sort of come into that. So if we've got time a little bit
Absolutely.
later on, I'd love to dive into that a little bit more because
Yeah,
it's a pet project of mine, that whole product world. I think it's a really
love to.
interesting area. But let's focus a little bit to start off with as we said at the start, this sort of rapid rise of fraud and AML with it, in the industry, full stop. It's not slowing down. It's becoming more and more sophisticated. It's becoming more and more difficult to stop. It's like one of those things that sort of morphs and takes on new forms it's a shapeshifter in terms of where we're
Yeah.
looking.
Yeah.
So we have to be more and more sophisticated in our way of battling that. I've
Yeah.
spoken to some people who've done some amazing jobs on that so far. I'm really interested to take your take on what it's looking like as a whole at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I get the question, why are we seeing a rise in money laundering? And it's because we're seeing a rise in crime.
Yeah,
We, you know, Money laundering is because they're trying to make illicit gains look legitimate. And
yeah,
so you're seeing a rise because you're seeing a huge rise in crime because we have professional fraud and scam networks that have literal compounds that are dedicated to scamming people. I don't think we had that before. We, of course, had, criminal organizations in the past that had, big organizations of different ranks of people, but now organizations have trafficked people, are placing them in these compounds, making them, call these poor victims, and they are victims themselves. And
Mm.
so you have that. But then you also have these criminal organizations who have a variety of means to actually launder those funds. So they don't have to go to the bank with bags of cash, though some still do. Um, they can use crypto, they can use prepaid cards, they can use synthetic identity to actually get accounts with these banks. And so because they have those diverse means, that just makes it even harder to really counter that, to to really track, because they could start in fiat, they could go to crypto, they could come back to fiat. Um, and I think that that's a critical moment there too, because these criminals are still needing to leverage the fiat system because you can't transact solely in crypto at the moment. And so they have to somehow use the traditional fiat system. And so that's critical that any player in, I mean, in both crypto and in fiat, but that they are catching and understanding who their customers are, to understand why are they transacting in this method, so that they understand whether the goods that are coming in derived from illicit means or if it's legitimate activity.
Incredible, isn't it, about how sophisticated that is, and already, in this conversation, you kind of blown my mind. I hadn't thought about the compound aspect and just how, how far that's gone and how organized the whole thing is. You kind of still think
Yeah.
about it as the sort of older Ozark days, days, don't you, in terms of where it sits. But this is something that requires a completely different view of how to police it, to steward it, to look at where it goes. And but it's not being easy, it's not being stopped because we're looking at traditional measures. So tell me a little bit about where the the points of failure are at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough. Banks, fintechs, anybody in the financial services business, especially, they're in a tough position because they're trying to offer a smooth customer experience with limited friction. Everybody's talking about you can get onboarded in, you know, however many minutes. But then that makes it easier for criminals to get in. And there's a
Mm,
conflict there. Smooth customer experience with preventing criminals from taking advantage of your organization. So that means, organizations, if they want to offer that seamless onboarding experience, they need to either invest in really good technology that is identifying these AI generated documents, synthetic identities that are leveraging information from false information, stolen information, legitimate information from customers. So it's like a mix of different things. They have to identify that that's not legitimate. And then once that customer is onboarded, monitor continuously throughout their life cycle at that organization that what they're doing is consistent with, their customer profile, and that it's not illegitimate. They have to do that at scale, if it's a large organization for millions of customers in real time and for very large portfolios. And even if you're not a large organization, even if you're a small organization and you have a really small staff, it's a tough challenge. And I'll give you just one example to really contextualize this. ProPublica, a US nonprofit newsroom, they recently released an investigative report on how criminal organizations behind pig butchering operations are opening up bank account after bank account with false details to wire millions from defrauded victims to their offshore accounts. And this is where it's critical that banks understand who their customers are, but then they're monitoring that activity continuously. Would it make sense if a teacher, let's say in Brighton, is wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars to these unknown Cambodian entities, let's say?
mm,
That's weird, right? Like, why are
yeah.
you sending what would seem to be your life savings? And that's where AI comes into play. That is where banks, fintechs cannot do this using rule-based systems
Mm,
because it's too big a problem. Criminals are using AI, and there's just too much. They have to use AI, which can continuously adapt to stay in line or ahead of criminals who are adapting every day too,
Mm.
to try and keep pace with to how criminals are evolving.
Let me touch on that because this is a very interesting sort of space, right? So there are in banks some of the smartest technologists in the financial services area. Full stop. There are
Yeah.
some of the smartest technologists in the world. Also, in criminal enterprises, there's some of the smartest technologists in the world as well. So you've got
Yep.
this sort of battle royale that's going on at the same sort of time, with both of them trying to gain advantage over the other. And you just mentioned, the speed of adoption. I was with someone yesterday who was talking about AI effectively living dog years, in terms of how we're living with things, how quickly things evolve, and how many very, very smart people are investing into all their time into this sort of space. And I completely get the fact there that AI can start to look at those sort of things and
Yep.
notify it. But when you've got good and evil working against each other, how do you sort of sit there in the middle of that to make sure that you guys are ahead of the curve on all of that sort of thing and winning that battle?
Yeah, yeah, and that is where I think Lynx has really unlocked something that historically um, other fraud prevention capabilities haven't really done quite yet. Is that we use AI that learns and adapts every single day to changing fraud patterns. Because once you put a model into production, it immediately degrades because criminals, like you said, they're smart. If
Mm,
they're stopped, they're gonna try anything to get over that barrier, to get the money out as fast as possible, right? And so what we do is historically, or even today even if you have models in place, which you think, okay, I've got models in place. That's great. We're ahead of the curve. We're not using rule-based systems anymore, which are static. Criminals are going to get around that. Even if you have models, a lot of models only update, let's say, every 6 months. Criminals aren't going to update their patterns or their behaviors every 6 months. They're going to do it every day. And so
yeah,
what
yeah.
we do is we've developed AI models that basically take the learnings from the day prior, both genuine behavior and fraudulent tactics, and then train our models to make sure that they're up to date with those behaviors and those tactics that fraudsters are using to make sure that every single day the models are refreshed. And that both leads to a better customer experience because you're not continuously having your transactions decline. Let's say you go on vacation. Um, and then for fraudsters who are changing their tactics to try and get around the barriers that we put up, we're able to keep pace with that and even prevent it.
It's a really interesting collision as well, isn't it? That you mentioned there, the sort of digital desire to want to have everything as friction free and as smooth and easy as possible, which
Yes.
everyone has to compete with,
Yep.
alongside that sort of ability to fundamentally remain safe. And I think everyone wants that sort of instant access and instant demand, but they forget the sort of complexity and the ramifications if not. So I think it's a really interesting sort of position that we find ourselves in that sort of space as well. And you
Yep.
mentioned that sort of evolution, and obviously, we are evolving at pace within the space at the same sort of time. If you look at AML compliance as a whole, and where we expect to see trends moving to, AI is very clearly at the center of all that. But
Mhm.
what does it look like as a whole?
What's interesting
Where are we
in
where are we going?
Right, right. If we take a step back on where AML is actually, because we've talked a lot about fraud, it's very interesting the difference in evolution in terms of embracing technology between fraud and AML. Because
Okay.
fraud, historically, there haven't been as many regulations on fraud. We're just now starting to see more regulations in terms of banks being required to have effective systems in place and to reimburse customers, right? I mean, we don't even have that in the US anymore. You click a tick box that you acknowledge, and then, banks are free of liability.
Hmm.
But in AML, you have a lot of strict regulations requiring banks to do certain things. And you have the regulator oftentimes, watching your every step to make
Of
sure that
course.
you're complying with these requirements. And so there's been less room for innovation in AML because banks and fintechs are more hesitant because they don't want to make a misstep. What you're seeing now, though, is an evolution from the top down, which I think is where it's needed. The regulators, especially in the UK, are saying you need to take a risk-based approach. You need to be effective. Just, placing a blanket policy or technology, one size fits all, isn't sufficient anymore. We need to make sure that you know what your risk is, what the threats are, and then you're applying an approach that fits that risk exposure, not just saying, okay, I'm good because I put this monitoring system in place. And
Mm.
then, things are slipping through the cracks, or you have this huge operational spend that's not actually catching risk. And so, what you're seeing now is that firms are feeling a little more comfortable to apply AI and AML. I mean, just 2 years ago, it's crazy. I was at some of these conferences and people were talking about, well, do we apply AI? And now it's like full blown, let's go. How can
It's
we
really
do it?
interesting, isn't it, how that's evolved over. You can see it this year in particular.
It's so interesting. And so in AML, we're at this point where it's like, okay, where are we going to apply AI? And what we're doing at Lynx is we're applying it on both the side of making sure, in AML, you have to make sure that you're screening your customers and your payments for sanctioned individuals and entities. You can't let, an entity who's based in Iran, transact through your bank. Let's say you're in the US or UK. And so we're making sure that those lists are really enriched using these natural language process capabilities to make sure that you're including any name variation possible for a particular name, but then that you're also applying the most optimal, let's say, model to score the similarity of names, because in screening oftentimes you get a ton of false positives because banks are super risk averse. They don't want to let anything get through, and so they're setting the thresholds at the floor, so you're just flooding your analysts with false positives. Whereas we're
Yeah.
saying you can increase those thresholds. You just need to do it in a risk-based approach. So if you have a higher risk portfolio over here that you're a little worried about, let's apply a certain let's say name screening methodology that's going to cover more risk, cover more name variations, but then maybe have the thresholds a little lower. But then in this area, in your low risk portfolio, maybe let's set the threshold a little higher. Let's make the methodologies for screening a little tighter so that you're not getting as many false positives. But it's that tailored screening approach combined with cutting edge technology that
Mm.
we're not just saying we're going to apply an AI pilot, which is great. I'm not going to lie. Co-pilots are great, but you got to make sure that what's coming into the system is good, it's enriched, you have the best intelligence, and then you're applying AI to make sure that what your analysts are actually seeing is is good, that it's worth their time, that it's actual risk that you need to mitigate as an organization.
The classic case of garbage in, garbage out alongside everything else with where we're sat, right?
Spot on. Spot
Yeah.
on.
And you mentioned the regulators there, and you spoke about it on both sides of the pond. Obviously, the regulators come in for a fair amount of stick at various stages, but this is obviously where it's at a critical point and their role
Mhm.
within it. I do feel like there's been some developments and progress in terms of the way the regulators are interacting with things at the moment. Is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting. In the UK, I find that you all have good feedback from the regulator in terms of, the Dear CEO letters. A lot of what the regulator wants, their feedback, a lot of it's public. So organizations can actually go out there and look at, this is what the regulator's recommending. Maybe this is what I need to put into practice as an organization. And so you see that even in the US now, you're seeing notices on red flags that organizations need to be monitoring. And so, what we're doing at Lynx is we make sure that, those red flags that are coming out, that we're able to monitor for those by implementing, rules to look for these known risks, but that also we're able to apply that unsupervised and supervised machine learning to look for those anomalies of those unknown risks that maybe
Mm.
regulators don't know about yet, that your organization is going to escalate to them in the next, suspicious activity report, and then that will be the subject of their next notice. So you kind of got to have both sides of the coin of looking for those known risks, but then also those unknown risks as well.
I think it's also sort of very difficult, isn't it, when we're sat here right now with this sort of evolution to really predict what happens in the future. But I guess as a coming back to full circle to that head of product base role that you're in, your world has to be let's skate towards the
Yep,
way the puck's going,
that's
doesn't it?
right.
It's
That's right.
a phrase I keep using at the moment, but I love it. Um, tell me a little bit about where how you do that, how how in a world of volatility and in a world of rapidly advancing technology, how we sort of move ourselves further forward.
Yeah, you really have to look at what are our customers telling us in
Mm,
terms of what they're seeing, because they're the ones that are at the front lines, right? And so we can read as much as we want, um, which is good. You have to have the market informing you, but you also need to have your customer informing you. So there are a number of different sources that you need to take into account when you're looking at your roadmap, let's say. But in the compliance space, what we're seeing is, of course, the use of AI, but also going back to that garbage in, garbage out. What intelligence are you using across your organization? Right now,
mm,
it's so siloed, and I understand why. There's different mindsets, different experience sets, capabilities, technologies across fraud, AML, cyber, but when you unify these things, that's when you can really get to predictive, proactive capabilities. Because take money mules, for example. In AML, it is so hard to detect mules because they transact at these super low denominations. There's
mm,
no way you're going to have rules that can identify those, because you'd be flooding your analysts with false positives for
mm,
$200 transactions. That's where cyber comes in, the device level signals or fraud. Hey, where was the money coming from before it went out? And so once you start to unify those data points, that's when you start to see the full picture. So that's where, I think the future really lies in this intelligent, coordinated systems that are unifying the insights from these different areas, but in a way that makes sense for the organization. Because when we start to talk about these coordinated systems, people are like, it's too much. It's already a lot right now.
yeah,
You have
yeah.
to do it. You
There
have
is
to
that
do
danger.
it.
You're right, isn't it? It's already a lot right now. It's definitely something you're hearing.
It's usable. It's how does this give you actionable intelligence?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you see those graph pictures and you're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
It's actionable intelligence.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, and I've been a bit of a data geek for a long time, through various different things. I actually came through reading about Tesco, and dunnhumby and the Tesco club card system, which is a whole nother story for a different stage and probably won't mean anything to many people watching this sort of thing. But I was just I love the whole idea of data visualization. I love the idea of actionable insights, and I think if you look at the very best exponents of where data has been at its absolute best, full stop, it's where people have been able to translate that huge amounts of data into simple actions which allow people to, in sporting terms, make the right run at the right time to, to score the touchdown, to, to do wherever it go. And I think we sort of miss some of that in terms of actually what we're trying to do with things. People are so busy about trying to make things as graphic as possible that they actually miss, right, what's the actual, the insight that comes off the back of it. And actionable insights is something which I am absolutely obsessed with on my day job on a day-to-day basis. But I think it
Yep.
becomes even more important as to where you sit. Let's round up, by talking a little bit about Lynx and the business itself. So
Yeah.
obviously you're right in the thick of one of the most important areas of humanity, full stop, full stop at the moment. And if we talk about its significance, it couldn't be in a more important place. But tell me, we've spoken about where everything's evolving and we've spoken about rapid pace of change and everything around that. But tell me about what's exciting for Lynx. We're here more or less exactly at the half point of the year in 2025. Um, so we don't age this too much. But tell us what comes moving further forward over the next sort of 6 to 12 months for you guys.
Yeah, in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to be launching our AML transaction monitoring capability, which is that technology that's used to look for patterns across large sets of data for those money laundering patterns. So, right now, we have the fraud prevention capability, the screening capability that looks for those sanctioned individuals and entities for across customers and payments. And then it'll be the money laundering component, looking for that with our with our very configurable system and AI supervised and unsupervised machine learning models. And we're really excited to provide that package to customers because what we're seeing is some customers want point solutions that are really good. I just want a really good fraud prevention solution. But then others are looking for the whole suite. They want a whole suite that gives you some of that holistic intelligence across those capabilities, and so that's where I'm really excited, where the
Mm.
company's moving is toward that integrated, holistic capability to provide their customers with that actionable intelligence across those different areas.
I can tell the excitement from you from a product perspective coming back from there as well, because I think it's so important, as you say, to be bespoke in this day and age. We've got to look at something there which isn't the days of legacy technology, which is saying, here's our product, you have to adapt to it. It's let's listen to the customers, let's look at what we're doing, let's make something there that can be tailored and suit the right needs of the right sort of people,
Mhm.
and having that feedback all the time, because as you say, threats change, fraud changes, yeah, money laundering changes. Everything is moving at that sort of pace, and so I'm in awe of businesses like yours who are sat there to sort of being able to go on that journey and make sure that everything changes at the same sort of stage as where it's moving. So exciting times for the business by the sounds of it.
Yeah, very exciting.
And so if you're looking at people who should be reaching out to you, if you're looking at companies who are right in the sweet spot for you, who should be having those conversations, who should be who should be talking to Links right now?
Yeah, anyone who has a money laundering or fraud risk, from fintechs to financial institutions, and so really anyone who's looking to prevent that fraud in real time or to identify risk in real time, we'd love to talk to you.
You mentioned as well beforehand the sort of mecca of financial crime, which is in the crypto world to an extent. Obviously, we've seen a lot of movement in there. Is that something where you guys are deeply involved as well?
Not yet.
Yeah,
The crypto analytics firms, it's so different
yeah,
from kind of the fiat monitoring in the fiat world. And you know, what they say is, if you do everything, you don't do one thing
quite right.
really well.
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely.
so we're really focused on doing really well at our focus areas, which is with fiat. But I'm really excited for what some of those crypto analytics firms are doing because, man, yeah, that is definitely an area where
If you can
we
go
need
into
to
that forest, you'll
focus.
be able to pick some skills up from there at the same time as well, right?
That's right.
Very good. Listen, Alyssa, it's been an absolute pleasure. I knew this would be an episode I was going to enjoy, and there's
Thank you
so much,
so
there's so many
much.
different things to unpack from it. If people want to reach out and get in touch with you, the best way to do that.
Go to our website, lynxtech.com.
Perfect. That sounds great to me. Alyssa, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us. And to everyone else, we will see you very soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.